this to come around, so I'm so glad to finally say, Leslie Wingo, welcome to Creative Mornings.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank a few people. My friend Erica joined this morning bright and early, so thank you, Erica. Ben and the entire Creative Morning team, thank you for bringing us all together in this crazy time. Janet Zaretsky, thank you for always pushing me to do bigger and crazier things. To my partners and to my team members at Sanders Wingo, thank you for inspiring me every single day. And most importantly, to my husband, who has magically gotten my kiddos up and fed and out of the house. So they may pop up on camera, who knows? And for anybody who's listening to me on the internet, time is a resource you cannot make more of. And I certainly appreciate you taking the time. So a couple things. I have to admit, it's very strange for me to do this type of presentation. And while I can see some of you virtually, it's just weird not having you in an audience. So as we move through this conversation today, I'm going to ask for your participation a couple ways. One, through the chat box, and then also I have a poll built into this. So I've never done this before, which is great. It may work, it may not, but here we go. Whew. Hi, how are you? I'm asking how you are, but what I really want to know is this. How are you doing really? And I want us to look at this together for just a second. For me, I'm doing okay with an asterisk. And I had to divide my feelings into 3 different buckets: personally, civically, and at work. And personally, just to be honest, I'm exhausted. Being a Black female in America has always been tough, but mix in my new coworkers who are not here. They're 7 and 3. Working from home, sheltering in place, figuring out a possible vacation for our family, which is still up in the air, plus the nonstop news cycle, all of the social media channels, Black people being murdered by people who should protect us or by people who claim they were standing their ground. Never in my life did I ever think we'd be living in this moment. From a civic perspective, I'm more engaged than I've ever been. I am speaking up unapologetically, inserting myself into random conversations and attending protests, or as what I have been told, sometimes they might be called a riot. And from work is great because I love creative people, because we get to see things differently and we have the ability to rethink old things and create new things. And as a creative person, I am energized by what will change so many aspects of our world. In other words, I'm here for all of this. I want to also move a little bit and share a story that happened over the weekend. So Sunday, I was reminded about a time in my life, it was like 2.5 decades ago or something like that, when I was in college. And over Facebook Messenger, I was asked if the story I'm about to share with you, if it was true. And when I was in college, I joined a traditional sorority. I was a Black girl, clearly. And my best friend, my BFF, Mary, she's half Korean. Anyway, we would often joke that if our moms came to the sorority house, everyone would know who they were and who we were, because we didn't look like everybody in the chapter. Eventually, Mary moved away, and I was truly the only one in the chapter, but that didn't matter because I loved my chapter. I did all the things I needed to do to fit in and belong. Volunteered for tasks, I blew up, it seems like hundreds of balloons. I became a big sis. I did everything. I did it all. I was there for it. I worked twice as hard and did the work because I wanted to be a great leader, just like the leaders before me. It was finally my turn, and I was on the slate to be president of the chapter. If you would imagine my badass moment. Something unusual happened the night that we voted on that slate. The advisors for our chapter, they pushed back on who was to be president. Yep, they pushed back on me. I clearly remember the days that followed, and I was told it wasn't because I was Black that the slate did not pass, and that was their words, not mine. Long story short, and I won't go into all of those details, I asked the advisors in the national chapter to let me go alum, which they did. There were no apologies. There was no strategy to make things better. Instead, there was nothing but fear and frustration. Their fear, as I understand it now, they didn't want to be the first chapter with an African-American president. They were paralyzed in the fear of change. I was hurt, and I just wanted to leave and be done without a stain on my name. and wanted to move on, which I did in theory, but I'll be truly honest, not dealing with that situation, I am still haunted by something that happened around the same time RBG was appointed to the Supreme Court. I am mortified that I let my experience be swept under the rug. I am mortified that I didn't ask more questions. I am mortified that I didn't demand more. Here's what I know, and it's one of my favorite sayings. People hate two things, change and the way things are. 2020 has proven to be the year of change. For me, up until March, I was a road warrior. Not anymore. I remember my last business trip, it was to El Paso. It was a Thursday before spring break, and I have not been on a plane since. And I have a question, not just for reference, but do y'all remember when finding toilet was one of the biggest things that kept us up at night? My daughter, my oldest, she's 7, so she fully understands social distancing and remote learning. And I admit I'm a horrible educator. Teachers, #teachers should be paid more. And who would have ever thought that I, as a Black female, would be able to walk inside a grocery store or a bank with a mask on and that be okay? And just when I thought we had a few things figured out, the world turned upside down again. Only last month, George Floyd was murdered, but his death was no different and so different than the ones before. Was it because we were sheltering in place because of COVID-19? Was it that we saw law enforcement standing by and allowing that to happen? Was it that he said he couldn't breathe? Was it because he called for his mom? Here's what I think. I think we saw our own humanity and that moment of what would I have done play out for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Memorial Day 2020 is a day where we can no longer ignore the elephant in the room. We chose to ignore the lynching and murders of Black folks for hundreds of years. And for the first time, that video allowed all of us to be witnesses to murder. And as hard as it is to deal with, this is now part of our history. We are asking ourselves a lot of questions about our histories and our belief systems. And we've only begun to talk about race and class in America. We are trying to figure out how we own up to our responsibility and to how we got here. And the question you must ask yourself is this: now that I am a witness, what am I going to do about it? So you may be asking yourself if I've participated in a rally or riot, and to answer your question, yes, I have. And for me, the first rally I attended was truly an oh shit moment, and I also felt like I had to be in action. After the Houston Tillotson rally, I was talking to my husband, Christopher, about the event, and he and I spent a long time sharing our thoughts and how we were feeling, but I was left with, what in the hell do I do now? So I went into what I usually do and started checking my typical boxes. Speaking engagements, check. Writing assignments, check. Reaching out to folks, check and check. And I soon realized that by doing what came natural to me and what made me feel comfortable, I was moving, but I wasn't in action. And I want you to think about this. Are you doing what's comfortable, or are you in action? And to be in action is to be part of the solution. By checking my boxes, I was not creating change. And remember, people hate two things: change and the way things are. Years ago, I suggested that people need to have real conversations and talk to one another. So I basically took my own advice and started having real conversations. In particular, I had 3 conversations to understand what people were dealing with. One was with a philanthropist, one was with an entrepreneur, and the last was with a female business owner. And here's the thing, they are all white. When I met with the philanthropist, he wanted to know where he should put his dollars. This moment is a marathon, not a sprint. Making a pledge is a start. Throwing money at a problem does not make the problem go away. And don't get me wrong, the money is nice, but we have a ton of hard work to do that will pay off in the end. My second conversation was with an entrepreneur who recognized his part in this moment, what I find to be huge and refreshing. And he's committed to doing something but doesn't know where to make the most impact. And he doesn't want to come across as a white savior, which I can absolutely respect. We cannot cause change in a vacuum. I need for the Anglers to ask the questions and have the hard conversations with Black folks, people of color, and the other only ones to fully understand what has been missing in our world. From there, we can create new possibilities. My last conversation was with a business owner, and she is a woman that I greatly admire, and she shared how she grew up very much in an East Texas stereotypical home rooted in Southern cultures and traditions. This conversation was most enlightening because up until this point, I never truly thought about what happens mentally, emotionally, and physically when a person's belief system is significantly different than that of their parents and their grandparents. When a person has to truly unlearn and unpack decades and memories, perspectives, and false narratives. And that is a lot to deal with. If I'm willing to put the work in, so can you. And I have another question for this group. And remember, it's not to blame or shame anyone, but we need to start dealing with this. If we don't start working through it, change will never, ever be possible. Robin DiAngelo suggests in White Fragility, if you have racist points of view, it's because you were socialized inside a racist society. I feel we've also grown very comfortable with polite racism and being politically incorrect. Our silence, our refusal to own it, is now complicit in things never changing. Our actions matter. Our words matter. Some of us may remember that one time we let a racist comment or joke slide, or when we didn't stand up for someone. That was then, and it's time to move forward. America, it's time for us to grow up. The time to do the real work is right now in this moment. Finally, we can admit we have a problem in America with race, class, and systems. We must also rethink and create new systems that replace stuff that has never worked in the first place. Politically correctness plus racism have been woven together and got us here. White folks, you have to ask the question. This is how we get to a place of understanding and are able to see the world from a different points of view. And in return, you're going to get feedback that may be hard and uncomfortable and unimaginable, but this is the truth of the perspective of what Black folks and minorities have been living with for centuries. Humans, for the most part, because I know there are a few that are colorblind, we are not blind to color. White folks, again, you have the power to create America's promise for all. You have to dig deep, face our history, both written in books and the pieces that have been omitted. From there, you have to find the road that you are comfortable with. What you do for the next generation, and what does that look like for this generation that hasn't been born? I need you to get comfortable with that so we can keep moving forward. Black folks and people of color, let me be clear, this is not our problem to solve, but it is our responsibility to share what we know, pass along information, and be prepared to pivot into what is next, and always continue to teach and share our wisdom. There is no playbook moving forward. No one has this figured out. And I think for creative people, no rules are the best rules, and this is good. We can dig deeply, move past our comfort zones, and create something new. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be worth it. If you have questions, do the work, understand perspective, and always be in action. We can no longer be paralyzed and buried in our political correctness. I want to live in a world where all of us feel like we belong and that we're going to be okay. I never want my kids or anyone's kids to experience failure because of the color of their skin or because of who they are. Nor do I want people to feel like they can't stand up for or stand in for someone else. Don't you want that too? So with that, I want you to ask yourself, what are the top 3 things you are willing to do to build America's promise together? My last request is this as I close out. In the chat box, will you please share with us one thing you're going to do to be in action? If it's reading a book, if it's having any of the conversations that were suggested this morning in the shout outs, or if it's having that talk. What are you committed to? What are you willing to do? What are you willing to create? It'll be worth it in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks.
So we're going to enter into what is a wider time of conversation now with Leslie. I first want to say thank you to her for showing up in the way that she has, in this authentic way. I mean, how can you not? We're in your home. So thank you for allowing us into your home, into your space. I will say it's worth mentioning that insecure was a theme that you mentioned to me when we met, whatever it was, 18 months, 2 years ago, whatever it feels like it is, 10 centuries ago, I don't know. And I'm wondering how, I'll start things out by just asking you this question. How do you think this talk changed for you from what you originally thought of when you thought of the theme Insecure to what you just shared with us today?
It's a good question. I think insecurity, part of it for me was how do I come at this so we can have conversation and make changes? Because it's very weird to talk about these things because we've never talked about them before, and there was never been a reference point to talk about them. So it was always showing up and being very polite and being very uncomfortable with speaking my whole truth, like the sorority story. I haven't shared that with anybody in 20 years. And so now I'm saying what I'm thinking and not trying to sugarcoat it. And while it's refreshing to do that, just know it feels like a sweater that needs fabric softener. It's still very itchy on the inside, but I'm proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud of the work that we're doing in the creative community. I'm proud of the people who are owning up to this idea of, okay, I don't know what to do, instead of sweeping things under the rug. So the insecurity piece moves a lot. It shows up in different places, but I'm here for it.
Hi, thank you so
much. Look at that baby.
This is Otto. We do mornings together. I am a person of color, and I am within communities that are trying to spotlight and focus uplifting the Black community specifically. But something that I run into is that there are other persons of color, communities, populations that are also disenfranchised. And how, with leading with equity, how do we create unity between these communities? Because I feel like people try and divide us. And when it comes to opportunities, we know statistically that the Black community is far and beyond Latino community, the Asian community are often denied more opportunities and the space to occupy. And while simultaneously lifting them up, how do we come through that door together?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's some of the work that we have to also do and dig into of minority representation and supporting one another. I'm working with actually an agency in California to have some of these same conversations, because when we were talking, we're like, how do we solve this amongst us so we come together as a unified front? So to answer your question, I don't have an answer, but what I do think is that now we are starting to have those conversations so we can create those possibilities together. If we keep fighting with one another, it's not going to make any kind of difference, and it just keeps us separated and further apart. So if I come up with a brilliant answer and I have a great creative idea, I will share it with everybody. But just know that that's part of the work that we need to do, and that is definitely part of this path.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selena. And I think Fabian came up in my chat. Robin's
Hello.
on.
Oh, can you hear me?
Hey.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
I just wanted to elaborate on what she said, because I've been this past like 3 weeks, I've been like on Zoom calls and seminars about diversity and all this stuff because of what happened, and I'm getting training and all this stuff from different groups. And something that happens a lot, but has been happening and not a lot in this conversation, is that I'm Latino. Is that every time I bring Latino issues, they are like, right now is not the time to talk about this. We're focusing on Black Lives Matter and not this. And the thing that I see problematic with that is that I support Black Lives Matter, of course I do, but I don't like what the response that I've gotten is I've been vilified for bringing Latino issues or something. And then it's kind of like, I don't think, my opinion is that I don't feel like it's necessary to suppress Latino voices to like raise Black voices. And I've had that has happened a lot. And that I just wanted to elaborate on that basically, about that division and stuff.
You know, I've seen that pop up as well in different places in terms of, do we do this? Do we have these conversations with Black folks only? Or do we bring everybody in and have those conversations? And I think there's two roads, and I don't know which one's right, so I'm kind of playing with both of them to see where it happens. One, I do encourage Black folks to come together and talk about this stuff, because I don't know if we've ever felt like we've had a place to do that and do it in a way that is like it is in this moment. And also to understand fully what the Black community is going through. I also don't think we should exclude other people, but I want Black folks to have this moment to be clear in where they are. And after we are clear, bring in additional conversations. It's not to exclude anybody else, but I think it's important that when we look at history, for example, making sure our stories are told in the Texas history books and what those truly are. And then I also think those stories should be written for Latinos and the Asian community and LGBTQ, but I don't want to muddy any waters or make anybody less than or less important. So I think everybody should have their moment, but I also do think we have to bring everybody together when the moment is right. And so I would beg for patience in this moment and let us get to a point where we truly understand the scope of what we're dealing with, because I think as Black folks, there's things that I'm still learning today that I had no idea existed. And I'm a Black kid from El Paso, and the Latino culture is very important to how I grew up. And I've often said, you know, when we talk about what we do in our family, it's always with that influence. But I really need to understand what I've been missing from the African American side as well. So your grace and your patience is greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I don't know who iPad is, but we can find out, and hopefully this person will let us know who they are when we spotlight them.
Oh,
Hi,
California.
Usually I'm on my computer, but today on my iPad, so I haven't set it up to put my name on.
Okay.
I just really wanted to respond to the last two individuals. One who I know is our commissioner. And it is this interesting time is that, you know, when I think about Mike Ramos, who was killed here in Austin by the police, you know, he was Latinx, but he was also Black as well, right? And so like, which part of that got him killed, right? It could be like a force of both, right? But I think that there's two things that I always think about is that whose bodies are on the line in the street, right? And so I love that I'm seeing all kinds of people come out, but then when I look at the ratios, those numbers, and if I look at like the history, not that there hasn't been a Latinx protest movement, because there definitely has, and there is a history of activism, but when we see like how those groups come together to support each other, I do not see that has been there as strongly as it could. So I think there's I guess I can only speak for me. I think that there's like sometimes it's not an acknowledgement, but that no one wants to get into the oppression Olympics, but also there has to be an acknowledgement. And when, for instance, you know, Latinx people that are talking about oppression, but don't acknowledge that there is anti-Blackness in the Latinx community, then, you know, those kind of things become complicated as well, because it's kind of like, you know, it is not a monolith as well. So I think that there has to be trust gain on both sides, and part of that trust can be seeing this sharing of the burden of putting lives and bodies and voices out there for various reasons. And I know that in sometimes that can be harder in the Latinx community for various reasons, but when I look at DACA, which I've been a supporter of, I see that it's happening. So I think that there has to be, you know, part of the trust is also to be gained by seeing action. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I would really just want to appreciate everyone who's showing up in such an authentic way. I'm really, I feel fortunate to be even in this conversation as a listener. So thank you for showing up this authentically. I think Matt had his hand raised. We can go to him next. I see you.
Hi.
Hi, Leslie. First of all, thank you so much for showing up today and sharing your story and your insights in this whole debacle that's gone on for way too long. I've been churning over in my own mind, seeing that we're, quarantined, and that's all I could do is spend a lot of time in my mind and seeing everything that's going on. And I keep coming back to my economics class that I had in college fairly recently, a few years ago. And, it seems like there's such a big movement towards the human factor of racism and trying to eradicate that and trying to call it out when it's there. But there's also the other part for me in that economics portion that I am kind of at a loss, and I've been racking my brain as to what we might be able to do or what we can start looking for or start moving towards to make the change and the difference, especially in your situation being a teacher. Our education system has such a huge role in all of this, and the class that we are all classified as, being with the white privilege being more the mid to upper class that is overwhelming this country. And because of the economics of how the money is distributed to communities, the Black community doesn't have the opportunities that most white communities do to get the proper education, to have the kind of things that the mid to upper class do, and that's what's kind of oppressing a lot of the Black community. I just kind of was wondering your thoughts on what kind of movements we can kind of look towards to making those changes in the education system and the classification and economy.
Ooh, that's a big question, or a series of questions. So I think one thing is this: calling something out as racism is it's just calling it out. It's not creating change.
Right.
And when I look at communities of color, I don't think it's that they're not educated. I just don't think the education is the same in terms of what is expected from, as we would call it, the general market. And so what you're talking about, and all three of those buckets are changes to systems, not into how we operate. The systems don't work, and we have to create new systems. And this is where I would push back and ask, where do you want to dig in so we can create those new systems for this American promise, right? It's not the communities are the communities for so many different reasons. The reason the systems are complicated, I think, are done maybe on purpose, maybe not. I really don't have the answer, but what I do know is simplicity is hard, and to get to a simple solution, there's a lot that has to be unraveled. And are we prepared to unravel things that have already been in place? And we do things just because that's the way they've always been done. We have a school year, and we do the school year because that's the way it's always been done. We have a political system that takes place, and we start the primaries in Iowa. Why do we start in Iowa? I have no idea. I would like that system to change, and we start in Houston, where we get a different perspective from a different group of people that are diverse in so many different ways. So I think we need to start looking at systems and understanding why they were created in the first place, and how do we change from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree. It really does feel like it's two battles that kind of have to happen, from that human factor and then the systematic factor that's involved here.
Mm-hmm.
And the human factor is just as difficult as the systematic factor as well, because human nature is really you know, the whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I mean, that's not fair to say. But then there's the whole systematic of what this country is built on and everything, and trying to make that come around. It's definitely a lot of very hard work ahead of us all as humankind. And, you know, by you being here and talking about it and giving us this opportunity to have this discussion, it really is a right step in the right direction. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I would also add to, because I keep seeing things pop up about, you know, other resources. If you haven't had an opportunity to listen to the podcast 1619, that's a good one that talks about the economy and what the global economy is built on in this moment. And it's disturbing.
Amani, I see you at the top of my list.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
My question really is about kind of piggybacking off of that systems, but as a leader, I know that in advertising, you've seen recently like the 600 and Rising, the 600 Black professionals kind of signing that collective open letter. So I would just ask you, as you're leading your teams, what kind of systems are you guys creating, and what have you been kind of excited about within your agency, and how you're kind of leading and managing those people and creating that culture?
Oh, such a good question. So what are we creating? So years ago, we were an agency that was primarily in Austin, and our Austin office primarily focused on African-American consumers. And the thing that is most exciting to me now, and I'm going to borrow words from our strategic planner, Pearl, she says that in the United States, we may all speak the same language. We don't always speak the same culture. And I think that is huge, because in years past, we used to have to explain, and I explain, you know, when we're pursuing creative work, what's Black about it. And Black people are not dark-skinned white people. We're different. So we'd have to, you know, do all this work to push through why the work mattered and how it was different and how it laddered up and all these things. It is now nice to be able to truly speak in the voice of the consumer and not have to do all of those gymnastics and mental math and how we're going to get this through, because clients are now open to, this is different. This time is different. We're able to have conversations with our clients about what they're doing in this moment and what can we work with them to create moving forward, so it's equitable across their brand, not just in the marketing, not just by, you know, diversifying what people see in the media, but really impactful work with organizations from all parts of the C-suite to how people show up to work. It's been hard, but it's been good. And it's like, finally, in a weird way, they can now see what we see and see why this group of people, and why minorities and only ones, why we're special and why we are not the same as everybody else. That's what we've been up to. It's been a lot of fun. It's been hard, but it's been fun.
All right. Thank you for the question. And last one is going to Scott McAfee.
Hey, Les.
Hey, McAfee.
I just finished 1619. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started Don Lemon's podcast, which is also very good.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, you know, something about like people can now see what we see. And I've had a lot of I've had more conversations with other white people about Black people without Black people being in the conversation than in the last 2 weeks than my entire life. And I think what we're experiencing, wherever we're at on the spectrum of wokeness, or what we think is wokeness, it's pretty overwhelming. And it's really overwhelming. It kind of makes you want to go back to bed, especially since we're all stuck at home. And you know, we were talking about education and law enforcement and economics, which is very overwhelming. When you go about your day in an office or in an airport or in the street or at home, and you encounter some of the small things, which can be very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
the most powerful thing I saw was that crazy lady in Central Park.
Oh, Amy
Um,
Cooper.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go about day to day in polite society, or what you want to call it, what would you say is there one thing, or is there an important thing you wish people could do or understand day to day?
So that's a good question too. If you haven't, if you're, well, I know it happens in Austin. I know it happens in other places, but if you haven't had the opportunity to do courageous conversations, I highly recommend it. And I did it because I was curious to see what else I would learn about, things that are happening. And the thing that I didn't realize at the time, but I am very aware of it now, is how much race shows up for me. And I used to think it was, when I'd go to the doctor or if I'd go to a meeting, but it's from the moment that I wake up until the moment that I go to sleep. And it's always there. And it's weird in terms of, and going back to the insecure piece, 8 weeks ago, show up, do my thing, get my hair searched at the airport, bitch about it on Twitter. But now, in this moment of wherever we are, being able to call out those things for what they are is very different. And being seen in a different way is also very weird, but also a relief that I can actually say that these things are wrong. And I also am noticing where they're little tiny things that we may have be aware of, but that was done so long ago, we just kind of moved past them. A friend of mine lives in Round Rock, and I was talking to her, and she lives off of a road called Plantation, which finally they're about to change the name of that road. So I hear, I don't know if that's true. There are schools still here in Texas that, home of the rebels, but they've been polite enough to remove the Confederate flag from their logos. But I see it more now, and I'm not going to ignore it, and I am going to start calling it out, not in a way to make people feel bad, but in a way that I feel makes positive change for all of our kids, because they don't need to deal with this bullshit. They need for us to be better than what we've been, so we can move on and create the America that we want it to be, not the one that we have in this moment.